is this actually going to be the most unhinged horror movie of the entire decade? I mean, we're talking about the use of real, scorching practical fire on set, a brand new, incredibly deceptive Necronomicon that completely flips the franchise's lore on its head, and a return to the absolute most brutal roots of the series. Look, this isn't just the AI-generated slop flooding your feed. This is a deeply researched explainer built entirely from confirmed sources and early critic reviews. So before we summon the Deadites, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It really helps us out.
Okay, so let's talk about Sébastien Vaniček's Evil Dead Burn, which is officially hitting theaters on July 10, 2026. The premise here is incredibly heavy and, honestly, super dark. We're looking at a film where cosmic body horror acts as a terrifying metaphor for the inescapable weight of an abusive marriage. Our protagonist, Alice, played by Souheila Yacoub, is a widow grieving her abusive husband. She seeks some kind of solace with her in-laws at their secluded home. But here's the kicker. They never actually believed her about the abuse. As the film's official synopsis teases, the vows she took in life live on even in death. So as bodies begin mutating into Deadites one by one, this claustrophobic nightmare turns into a literal family reunion from hell.
Okay, let's dive into this because early screenings have already taken place and the horror community is absolutely reeling right now. Just look at this reaction from F-Elm critic Bill Bria. Mean, nasty, and quite possibly the most brutal film in the series. Bria highlights how Vaniček brings a new French extremity edge to the Deadites. Now, if you're a horror aficionado, you know exactly what that means. We're dealing with a cinematic movement known for pushing boundaries to the absolute limit. It cuts incredibly deep, both physically and emotionally. It's this suffocating, incredibly mean experience that still, somehow, manages to keep that sick sense of humor the Evil Dead family of films is so famous for.
And guys, the reactions just escalate from there. Simon Thompson calls it jaw-on-the-floor nightmare fuel, with a tactile vision that does not hold back. The relentless wall-to-wall gore is apparently so intense that audiences were literally squirming in their seats. Critic Peter Gray noted that it's gloriously mean-spirited and violent to the point that it might even border on offensive for some. In fact, one reviewer mentioned that a guy sitting just 2 seats over from him audibly gagged during a particularly gnarly scene. So yeah, this isn't your standard popcorn horror. This is a deeply uncomfortable, ferociously violent onslaught that just refuses to let you breathe.
Which naturally leads to a very valid question from Brad Miska over at Dread Central. How the hell is this only rated R? The disbelief around this hard R rating is everywhere, especially since we know Vaniček actually had to trim down a brutal scene just to avoid an NC-17. Though, don't worry, he's promising a much more violent director's cut on home video later. Producer Rob Tapert even stated that this film has the least amount of blood, but the most amount of pure brutality in the entire franchise. He says it brings a Serbian energy to the screen, completely ditching the winks and nods from previous entries to lean incredibly hard into its vicious tone. Speaking of vicious tones, drop down into the comments right now and let me know, what is your absolute favorite Evil Dead movie so far? Let's get a debate going. So, how exactly did they achieve this visceral terror? How did Vaniček take a franchise that is already famous for its extremity and make a nightmare so vivid that you can practically feel the heat radiating right off the screen? Well, the answer lies in a massive, uncompromising commitment to the physical reality of the shoot. It all comes down to practical effects. Notice the core difference here. You've got the gritty, unpredictable nature of practical fire versus the overly clean, polished look of computer-generated flames. The director had an absolute refusal to use computers for the fire. He insisted that, hey, because the movie is literally called Burn, there needed to be real fire on set. Honoring that legendary DIY practical legacy that Sam Raimi started back in 1981, Vaniček knew that faking fire with CGI is honestly even tougher than faking blood. He wanted the body horror to feel physically exhausting and completely, terrifyingly real. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly why he made that choice. Look at Vaniček's quote right here. There are a lot of imperfections in reality, and those imperfections are really hard to recreate in CG. He specifically wanted those real flames, the actual dust and dirt smudging the lens, and the chaotic, dizzying movement of a handheld camera. By capturing the real-world messiness and the literal intense heat on set, he creates this exhausting, tactile experience. He wants you to leave the theater feeling physically drained, just like the characters trying to survive the night. But listen, while Vaniček definitely brought the literal heat with those practical effects, the true spark of this movie doesn't just come from the gore or the flames. It actually comes from a massive franchise lore drop that is going to completely change the entire Evil Dead universe going forward. Enter the fourth Necronomicon. Now, we learned back in 2023's Evil Dead Rise that there were 3 distinct books of the dead scattered across the universe. But this film totally shocks fans by introducing a completely new 4th Book of the Dead. And instead of a monstrous, fleshy tome, this is a subtle, leather-bound journal hiding ancient demonic incantations. It completely abandons that classic, grotesque, stitched skin aesthetic we've come to expect, choosing instead to hide its evil right in plain sight. Just look at the crazy visual contrast here. On one side, you have the extreme, teeth-clamped design of the classic Necronomicons, with those demonic faces literally stretched across the cover. On the other side, we have the deceptive, totally everyday appearance of this new journal. This book, which is secretly the notes of the protagonist's grandfather-in-law, looks like something you just pick up in the stationery aisle of a local bookstore. It looks entirely harmless. Well, until Alice opens it, revealing those signature, terrifying drawings and spells inked entirely in human blood.
Let's unpack the specific mechanics of this new book, because this is where the lore gets really, really fascinating. As Alice flips through it in the trailer, we see the journal is stuffed with penned notes, random newspaper clippings, and individual loose pages that hold immense demonic power. The grandfather-in-law apparently believed the devil would return if anyone read from the Book of the Dead, and it seems he actually collected pages from the other 3 books. This directly draws on the lore from Evil Dead 2, where we learned that scattered individual pages hold just as much power as the book itself. So this harmless little notebook is transformed into a weapon capable of unleashing the Deadites.
The terrifying takeaway here is that the Deadites are evolving, and they are expanding their reach fast. This 4th book brilliantly expands the universe that was established in Evil Dead Rise, proving that as long as the necessary pages are attached, the threat can take any form absolutely anywhere. The evil is terrifyingly adaptable now. If you're finding this deep dive into the evolving lore as fascinating as I am, please share this explainer with the biggest horror fan you know so they can get fully prepped before hitting the theater.
Okay, so we know the lore is expanding in brilliant ways, and the critics are absolutely gagging over the gore. But the ultimate question for any studio is always, will audiences actually burn with it? Let's pivot to the business side of things for a second, and look at the financial tracking for this highly anticipated standalone continuation. And this brilliantly illustrates where the franchise currently stands. Box office projections are placing Evil Dead Rise at a massive $26.9 million opening weekend in the domestic market. To put that into perspective, the 2013 remake opened to $25.7 million, and Evil Dead Rise opened to $24.5 million. This projection proves that the franchise's core formula, trapping a vulnerable group of people in terrifying isolation with an ultimate evil, is stronger than ever. It's riding incredibly high on the goodwill of its predecessors in a summer where horror is just absolutely dominating the box office. This film's commitment to relentless brutality practically guarantees future installments. In fact, there is already another entry, titled Evil Dead Wrath, officially on the way. The unyielding commitment to just absolute savagery, combined with its clever expansion of the lore and those strong box office projections, ensures that the Deadites are going to keep feasting on our souls for years to come. The franchise isn't slowing down anytime soon. It's honestly just getting meaner. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Are you ready to survive the next demonic invasion? Or will the subtle, everyday appearance of the new Necronomicon catch you completely off guard? Because as this universe expands, the evil is no longer just hiding out in creepy, isolated cabins, it's hiding in plain sight, right on your bookshelf. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on all things movies, lore, and entertainment, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and click on the screen to check out our next explainer. See you next time!